All right, I told you at the beginning of the podcast that we're going to talk about home buying, and indeed we are going to. I often talk about home buying with regards to residents, and I kind of tell them, hey, you don't have to buy a house during residency because most of them don't even consider that as an option because they got this burning desire to own a house. Well, the default option for people in training probably ought to be renting, honestly. And the main reason for that is a financial one. It just takes time for a home to appreciate enough to overcome the transaction costs of buying and selling, right? Generally, think about buying a home costing you about 5% of the value of the home and selling a home to cost you about 10% of the value of the home. So that's a 15% total round trip. So 15% of a $500,000 house is $75,000. So if your home doesn't appreciate $75,000 while you're in it, then you're coming out behind, right? It's not throwing money away to rent. It's okay to rent. You're trading money for housing. And guess what? Homeowners do that too. You throw money away on property taxes. You throw money away on insurance. You throw money away on mortgage interest. You throw money away on repairs that your landlord would cover if you were renting. All right. So there's lots of throwing money away no matter what you are. Don't let that be a reason that you buy a house and maybe it's not the right time to do it. You got to do more of the analysis than just mortgage payment versus rent payment. People are like, oh, well, I can get a mortgage that's less than my rent payment. Well, of course you can. You're supposed to be able to do that. Think about it as an investor, right? What does an investor have as income? They have rent. What do they have as expenses? Well, they have a mortgage plus everything else: taxes, insurance, repairs, upgrades, all those other things. Plus, they want to make a profit. So, of course, your mortgage should be less than rent. That's just kind of a given. I mean, if your mortgage is more than rent, then you're really not getting a good deal. All right. So, those are, all the reasons that people really think twice before buying a house during residency. Does it never work out? No, I'd say for a 3-year residency, it probably works out a third of the time. For a 5-year residency, it probably works out half the time that you do okay. So if you really want to own a house and you're okay with that risk, knock yourself out. Go buy one. I don't care. It's not my money. But at least think about just renting during residency. But as a general rule, I'm a big fan of ownership. I know our guest today was not, and that's fine. For some people, they want to be lifelong renters or renters for long term, or maybe in a different stage of life they buy, whatever. That's fine. I'm a big fan of ownership. I want you to own your house. When you're in a job that's stable, when you're in a personal situation that's stable and looks like it's going to be stable for 5+ years, so you can get appreciation more than the transaction costs, I want you to own a home. Hey, home ownership's great. I love owning my home. You can do whatever you want to it. You can renovate it. Although I guess technically you can still lose it to the government if you don't pay your property taxes. The bank can't take it, especially, once it's paid off. Plus, it's a bit of a hedge on housing costs once that mortgage is gone, right? When we bought this house many years ago, it was probably worth half or a third of what it's worth now, and that's before the renovations. We put enough money into it; it's probably worth substantially more than that now. But the point is, that mortgage payment doesn't go up over time. If you're on a 30-year fixed mortgage, it's the same mortgage payment, at least principal and interest, for 30 years. So if rent skyrockets, you've hedged against that. And once the house is paid off, shoot, all we got to pay now is property taxes and insurance and repairs and that sort of thing. There is no rent payment. There is no mortgage payment. And that's nice because it kind of helps control housing costs down the road. So I'm a big fan of ownership. I want you to own a home. But you need to buy it at the right time in your life and in your career to do it. Now, when you go to buy it, here's a couple of guidelines. And I think these are becoming more important now that people aren't getting 2.5% mortgages. I just saw an article saying mortgages are at the highest rate they've been since 2002. They're up over 7% for a 30-year on average. I think it was 7.1% is what I saw. And that reminds me of my first mortgage in 1999. It was 8%. And my second mortgage that we took out in 2006 was 6.25%. Those are more normal mortgage rates, right? This 2.5%, 3% kind of stuff that people have been seeing the last few years is not normal, right? Expect to pay more than that on mortgages in general. Sure, if rates fall and you can refinance to that, do it for sure. But you got to keep in mind that that's not really normal. So here's my recommendations. I recommend you don't spend more than 20% of your gross income on housing. I include everything in that, right? That's your mortgage payment, your principal and interest, your taxes, your insurance, maybe even throw utilities in there. Keep that to less than 20% of your gross income, and that will help you to build wealth. I also throw out a more useful figure sometimes, which is to keep your mortgage to less than 2 times your gross income. Okay, so let's say you got a $100,000 payment, you're making $200,000 a year. I would suggest you don't have a mortgage more than $400,000 and don't have a house that's more than $500,000. 2x your income plus the down payment that you have. Now, in some high cost of living areas, you're probably going to have to stretch that a little bit. But stretching is like going to 2.5, 3x, maybe 4x, not 10x. And that'll just make you house poor. You don't want to do that. So follow those guidelines when you're ready to buy a house, when you're in a position to buy a house, and then the house will be a blessing in your life and not a curse. All right. Mortgage payments or down payments are great. They help you to get a conventional loan, which generally has a lower rate, lower fees, more people competing for your business. But if you have a better use for your money, like maxing out retirement accounts, paying off student loans, building up an emergency fund, whatever, right when you're coming out of your training, a doctor mortgage is not a crazy thing to do. A doctor mortgage allows you to put down less than 20% and still not pay that private mortgage insurance, that PMI, that insurance the bank forces you to buy to protect them from you defaulting. It doesn't do you any good to pay PMI. But if you don't get a doctor mortgage and you don't put 20% down, you're going to have to pay PMI. So it's okay to use a doctor mortgage to buy your house. That's fine. But recognize your payments will be higher because you're borrowed more of the cost of the house. And you'll probably have a little bit higher interest rate and probably have a little bit higher fees. But it's a reasonable route to go if you have a better use for your money. Okay. Hope that's helpful in your decision whether to buy or rent, when to buy, how much to buy, what kind of mortgage to use to buy, and will help you to build wealth in your life, build your way toward financial independence, and have an enjoyable life at the same time.
The hosts of The White Coat Investor are not licensed accountants, attorneys, or financial advisors. This podcast is for your entertainment and information only. It should not be considered professional or personalized financial advice. You should consult the appropriate professional for specific advice relating to your situation.